Fishing in Minecraft is one of my favourite things to do. It's relaxing, it can be rewarding, and it's easy. But some would argue it's too easy, and maybe too relaxing. My mission is to overcomplicate and over-engineer a fishing game as much as possible. And I have a few goals. I want it to be skill-based, with a chance to fail. I want there to be a wide variety of fish you can catch. I want every fish to have its own size or weight. And I still want every action to use the fishing rod. So I'm here now in my creative world, and I've been testing and planning lots of different mechanics that can go into this fishing game. Like I mentioned before, I want it to be overcomplicated and over-engineered, but mainly on the kind of redstone side of things. I want it to be very simple for the player to play. Because I'm building this on Zedcraft, I want people to be able to enjoy it. But behind the scenes, I want there to be as much going on as possible. And I do want there to be multiple sections for the player to go through when playing the game. So first, I want to kind of talk you through the main ideas for the sections of the game, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty and we'll look at these individual components and what I've designed. So to begin with, I do want the player to actually catch something from some water, and that will trigger the start of the game. Then I want there to be some kind of fun mechanic where players have to turn off lamps. So there'll be a randomizer turning on lamps and the player needs to turn them off. And that is going to tie into the weighing system. So the better you do in the second phase, so think of this as phase 1, the better you do in the second phase, the heavier the fish will be, if that makes sense. Then, once you get through that phase, there will be the third phase. This is where you reel in the fish. We're going to use some kind of lamp system like this to show how close or far away the fish is. And then a mechanic here where you can either succeed or fail. If you succeed, the fish comes closer. If you fail, the fish gets further away. And then the final thing here is you need to actually catch the fish. The fish will fall down a wall of honey, and you have to fish the fish off the wall in order to collect the item, and that is how you win. So to begin with, you just start the game in phase 1. You try and do as well as you can in phase 2 to get the heaviest fish possible. In phase 3, you can lose. This is the first part of the game where you can actually lose. But if you succeed, then you get a chance to catch the fish. Hopefully that makes sense, because there are some more complexities with this game as well. But yeah, those are the 4 different phases of the game. So if you hear me talking about the weighing phase, or the reeling phase, or the catching phase at the very end, that is what I mean. But to begin with, let's show you how the start works. So it's very simple. You will throw a fishing rod into some water. You'll notice that I've put a target here. That target doesn't actually do anything. It's just something for you to aim the rod at, since you can't aim at the water. The item doesn't go into your inventory, but the item will go into some redstone. So once something has been caught, that will begin the game. Not necessarily a pressure plate like this. I'll probably take the item into a hopper and figure out a way to get a signal from that. And I think this will mean I will be able to count how many times the game is played, because I can just count the items that are in this system. I'll probably use Layer 3 so that people aren't waiting around too long. I don't want this game to last very long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes in total from start to finish. So yeah, it'll be Layer 3, but it's still kind of, a good 10-15 seconds of patient fishing before the game begins. Now, the second phase has a few different kind of elements to it. And that's in part because I was thinking, how complicated can I make this game? But first, I want to talk about the actual weighing mechanic here. So you can see we've got a clock going here that is currently powering nothing. I think this section will last a minute because we can use a very simple arrow timer in order to start the game. And we do this, that will pull back this block, and you can see we now have some items firing out here. So this is a redstone randomizer that I've designed here, where the signal comes into the first randomizer here, and if it is unsuccessful, this dropper will fire. So this is like the worst thing to happen, is the first lane, if it is only a signal strength of 1, this will fire and a stick will be sent out. If it is a signal of 3, this, you see, just happened there, this will then block this repeater from firing, but the signal will come round here and trigger this randomizer. And this is basically a way you can have a sequence of randomizers where you will only get one output, and that output is whichever one fails. So if this succeeds but then this fails, we will get a plank. If this succeeds and this fails, we will get a log. And I think I set this up to make it so that this one can fail as well. So in my setup, there is a chance that you simply won't get an item at all, and that is when you get the shovel in the last one. But these are, very basic randomizers here. So there is a 2 in 3 chance that you get the stick. There is a 8 in 9 chance that you then get a plank if you didn't get a stick. And then if this 1 in 9 chance happens, you then have a 2 in 3 chance of getting a log, so only a small chance to fail. Basically, the numbers don't really matter. This is just a random way of getting an assortment of sticks, planks, and logs. And why do I want this? Well, this is the fish's weight. The way that I want this to work is the sticks will be worth 1, the planks will be worth 10, and the logs will be worth 100. So if this was from, an actual round of the game, this fish would be 393 in weight. And I think it's a nice way to display this. Now bear in mind that you won't just have this clock running. I will talk about how that works. But this will be a very, very high score in the game. Most scores, if not all scores, will be lower than this when the actual game is being played. So there's a little bit of maths involved, but because I've used 1, 10 and 100, I'm hoping that it'll be fairly simple for people to work out. So yeah, this mechanism will connect up to some kind of chest. I probably want to have a chest that can be blocked, so that if somebody fails to catch the fish, they never know what the weight was. They will only discover the weight if they successfully catch the fish. But the next mechanic I want to talk about here is this minigame. So this is the second phase, and I want the player to be doing something here while the weight is being calculated. And I want the player to be able to impact how many times this fires. So the way I've done this is I've set up this minigame here. The redstone is fairly simple, but basically what will happen is a randomizer will choose one of these things here, which if I just push this button to simulate that, this then lights a lamp, which also turns this signal on. And the way this is going to work is if there is a lamp lit, then this piston will be pushed like this, right? So if any lamp, you'll notice that here, imagine we've got a few of these in sequence here. If any of these torches are on, this dust will be lit and this clock will do nothing. It won't be powering these randomizers. So the kind of vague law idea behind that is the lamp scares off the fish or scares off the food that the fish will be eating. I don't know. The law is not the important part of the game. It's more about having a fun mechanic to play. But the player will be down here. There'll be lots of lamps, maybe on both sides of the player, and they will need to hit the target. And if they hit the target, the lamp turns off, this dust turns off, and then this clock will start increasing the weight of the fish again. So to show you again, if we just turn this one on, We then need to hit the target block with a fishing rod. The lamp turns off again. So I want this to be quite, not action-packed, this step, but I want the player to be really keeping an eye on, like a focus on the lamps, checking both sides, running around. I want them to try and quickly react when a lamp gets lit. And I want there to be lots of randomness in this round. So there will be a randomizer powering these. I may also make it have this type of randomizer, a dropper hopper where there's like a fast clock, but a small chance that the randomizer will pick one of the lamps. So you might get 2 or 3 lamps in quick succession, and then another time there might be a 5-second gap, and then you might get a couple of lamps quickly again. So the randomizers will help make the game feel a little bit more dynamic and maybe more replayable, less predictable, I think. So that is one of the complexities here. The other complexity is in the clock itself. One of the mechanics that I want to implement here is I want to have different tiers of fish. The fish will actually be just items in game. I'll probably make up some fantasy fish or look at real fish or something like that. But, let's say there's a stick fish or a feather fish, and that could be the lightest fish. And then there could be a fish made of an iron block, for example, and that'll be the heaviest fish. I want the weight, not this weight here, but like the actual tier of the fish to impact how fast this clock runs. Because if this is a heavier fish, I want it to fire this part of the system more frequently, because I want there to be the chance for a heavier weight. But I also want that to make this section more difficult. So I want the lamps to light faster. So I think I'm going to use the same clock here to power both systems, the weighing system, but also the lamp lighting. Again, to add replayability to the game and to add some hidden complexities in the background. Someone might be playing the game and thinking, why are so many lamps lighting up? And then a player who's more experienced will say, ooh, that means you've got a rarer, heavier fish on the line, that sort of thing. And the redstone for this is over here. So you can see here, this lamp is lit. I'm just going to reset this line so I can show you exactly how this works. So we've got 5 input lines. These will be the 5 different weights of fish, with red being the heaviest and cyan being the lightest. So let's say we have a really light fish that's on the line that will send a signal into this, which will then power this lamp, lowering this, which connects the clock together. And I really like this setup that I've come up with here. It's quite simple in concept. So when this part of the system begins, this will just send a pulse down this line here. And then wherever we have a target block selected, the redstone will pull in there. So for example, if we have a target here, you'll see this redstone is now connected into the target block. That's one of the main benefits of target blocks in redstone, is they accept signal from the side of redstone dust going past. So we can choose where in this line we want the redstone signal to take a right turn. And what that does, if we look here, is it completes a circuit. So this will be down as well. And then we have a loop of redstone that goes around. So this is the heaviest line, and this is 6 ticks. The next one is 9 ticks, 12 ticks, 15, and 18 ticks is the lightest. That's nearly 2 seconds per loop for the lightest, and just over half a second per signal for the heaviest fish. So if I show you how this works, we can activate this, which begins the pulse. The pulse goes round and around the clock. Now this is the slowest. It's still fairly quick, because remember, we want this to have a chance to light a lamp, and we want it to weigh the fish. Even though it's the slowest, it's still fairly fast. So imagine a lamp is lit. This will then move this block out of the way, which means this is no longer going to the weighing system. And then the player turns off the lamp, which then connects this back up again. But yeah, I really like this idea of having the 5 tiers of fish. I don't think I'm going to tell the players which tier has been selected. And even when they catch the fish, I don't think I want the tier in the name of the fish. I don't want all the information to be given to the player. I think it's more fun to kind of have some of that hidden and for players to kind of be like, that was weird. This one seems a bit different to the others. You know, a little bit like Stardew Valley. You know, sometimes you'll be catching a fish in Stardew Valley and it is behaving weirdly. It is moving much faster than all the other fish and you know you've got something special on the line. Now, speaking of the different fish, I do want to show one more mechanic, which is over here. And this is a bit complicated and I designed it quite a long time ago. But essentially, I want there to be different fish that can be caught depending on the time of day. Honestly, I'm not sure I understand this enough to be able to explain it. But you can see here, this is giving it a signal strength of 11. So I think this means that when the sunlight is a stronger signal than 11, the day lamp will light. So the signal will go 12, 13, 14, and then 15, and then it'll stay on 15 at midday, and then it'll go 14, 13, 12 again. All of that counts as day. The moment it goes down to 11, we will then have dusk. I want to fully understand this again, so let's change this to 3000. And there we go. We are now looking at day. This has been blocked off by this because this is the same setup. So these are both very similar. These are signal strength of 11. These are subtracting whatever comes into the side. But because this is giving more than 11, this is both able to disconnect this signal in the middle and also power the day signal. So when it's 12 or higher, we will not get dawn or dusk because this is completely cut off. We will not get night because this is inverted here. So what this is doing is when the signal is 1 or higher, this torch turns off. So night will only fire when the signal strength is completely 0, right? But the day will fire when it's 12 or higher. And then this middle section with dawn or dusk is when it is between 0 and 12, because this will unpower, which retracts this piston, which means that both of these repeaters are powered. And then whichever lamp the block is in front of is the one that will get powered. And the way we do that is with this piston here. So once it is day, this block is pushed in front of dusk because obviously dusk follows day. So day comes in here, pushes the block. Then once this goes below a signal of 12, this will come through here and power dusk. Then once the signal goes below 1, as in it turns off, this will power night, this will turn off, so dawn and dusk will both turn off. This will also push this block over here in front of dawn, and then once night passes and the signal becomes higher than 0, we'll get the signal through here again, which will then power dawn. And then to complete the circle, once the signal goes above 11, we will then switch off dawn and dusk and power day. Hopefully that made sense. The one little complication that I actually needed help with from my friend Photon on the server is when somebody sleeps through the night or unloads the chunk and then loads it back in again, I didn't want there to be any problems with this middle section. I didn't want to get dusk when it was actually dawn. So what this does here, this is a very neat comparator trick, which I'm, again, going to try to explain. This here is the signal of the daylight sensor. So whatever this is, let's say this is a signal strength of 5. The signal strength of 5 will come through here, but then this is subtracting whatever it gets in the side. So this is 5. The comparator takes that signal and sends it out again. That's one of the things comparators can do. They can just give the same signal again. So this is 5, this is 5, that is then 4, and so it is then subtracting 4 from 5, which is why we only have one dust lit here. Now, if this is 12, let's say it's 12, this is 12, this is 11, 12 minus 11 is also 1. So no matter what signal we are getting from here, we should always get 1 out here. And what that does is it turns off this torch. So when this dust, and only this dust, is lit, nothing happens, because it's just, this is like the system waiting for something to happen. But when this signal changes, so let's go back to saying we are on signal 5, it's currently dawn, and it gets brighter. So we go from 5 to 6. This signal of 6 will go into here, but because there's 2 comparators here, the subtraction ends up happening a tick later. So this is 6, but this is subtracting 4. And so what that means is we get a signal strength of 2 out of here, which powers this dust, only for a tick, because this takes longer to subtract than it does to go through here. So the change happens, the change updates the dust, then we get a higher number through here, so this goes from 4 to 5, subtracts the 5, and then it goes back to 1 again. So whenever the signal goes up by 1, that dust will be powered briefly. And what that does is it sends a signal around here, and that goes into this piston. So that means anytime the number increases, the block tries to push itself over into dawn's position here. And then inversely, anytime this signal goes down, so again, let's say we're in dusk, this is a signal strength of 5. 5 minus 4 is 1. This is how it is in its waiting position. This goes down to 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. That dust is getting turned off. And then this becomes 4 minus 3, and the dust turns back on. But when this dust turns off, that turns this torch back on. The signal comes through here and powers this piston. So essentially, regardless of whether it is dawn or dusk, regardless of whether you've just loaded the chunk, you've just logged in, you've slept through the night, whatever, every time this signal changes, the system will update itself to the correct position of dawn or dusk. And I can't credit myself for this, like I say, Photon helped me with this, and it's genius. I absolutely love it. It's such a cool mechanism. And so the purpose of this whole section here is to have 4 possible options of fish that can be caught. And there may be a fish that can be caught in day, night, and dawn, and that will be a more common fish. So I'm thinking all I'll do for these is I will have this activate one of 4 droppers. So each dropper will have 9 stacks of fish in, so we'll actually have 36 stacks of fish, but not 36 different fish. Like I say, there will be some that are available in multiple times. Some of the rarer fish will only be available at one time. That gives us a bit of variety, and, technically, night lasts the same amount of time as day, pretty much. But if people are sleeping through the night, then maybe the fish that only come out of night might end up a little bit rarer. I do want kind of collecting to be a part of this game, so that's why I'm kind of trying to add more mechanics like this to add more variety. And maybe, some of the heavier fish only come out at dawn and dusk, as they're shorter periods of time, so they again will come across as being rarer fish. And I believe if it's raining or there's a thunderstorm, it will shorten how long day lasts, and it will increase both of these two. I don't know the exact maths behind that, but I don't mind, because that kind of plays into the whole fishing game thing, doesn't it? If it's raining, if there's a thunderstorm, some fish will be more likely to come out and play. And I like that. And so that covers everything that is relevant to this second section, the weighing section. Once this minute is up, this section will finish, and the third section, the reeling section, will begin. So because this is the reeling phase, I want there to be a way to succeed and a way to fail. Right? It's not quite the same as the weighing phase where you can't lose. If you just do really poorly, you will end up with a fish with a very low weight. But here, I've built this mechanic, and I do think this will be taller in the actual game, but I'll just show you how this works. So an item will be dispensed into honey, and as it falls down the honey, lamps will be lit. These green copper lamps are warning lamps. When the item is flowing down this section, that doesn't mean anything, nothing bad is happening. But once you get to the orange copper section, you need to have this lamp lit, otherwise you lose. And the idea here is the player will need to fish onto the pressure plate. So I want this to be quite simple, but again, you don't have very long to react, and you might start off over here, you see the lamp's light, you run over, and you try to activate the pressure plate. So we'll do that again, we'll activate this, and then we lit the lamp once it got to here, so we would have succeeded at that point. And I'll want a few of these around, maybe just 4, so 2 on either side. And again, there will be a randomizer that has a chance to trigger one of these. And I might make the randomizer the same as the one over here, where the heavier the fish, the more likely these are to fire, to make this part harder for the heavier fish. But the way this works is the item is dispensed down the honey, and honey has a special feature where it is not a full block. So an item, if we just dispense an item here, it is actually inside the honey block a little bit. If we turn on entities here, you can see here it is actually kind of inside both blocks. It's on the boundary. And what that means is we can have 2 hoppers here, and if we change which hopper is powered, we can change which hopper receives the item. So the item could go into both of these hoppers, but depending on which hopper is powered, we can control where the item goes. And so that's the point of this mechanic. I will just throw an item here so you can see this happen. Once that pressure plate is triggered, this torch turns off, which stops powering this block, which means this hopper can now accept the item. So this barrel would be considered a success. The item will come down, it won't be able to go into this hopper because of this torch. It will instead go into this hopper and you will get a success. But if you don't get the fishing rod there in time, then this block stops this hopper from working, which means that this hopper, which is now free from this torch, will trigger and you will lose, essentially. So I want this to play out. It could be a very quick round, but I don't want it to just be a one and done, you win or you lose thing. I want there to be, a few lives. So if you lose 2 times, but then you win 3 times and then you lose once, you're kind of in the same place that you started. Kind of like reeling in a fish. You might reel it in closer to you, but then it escapes a little bit and then you reel it in again. I want this phase to have that kind of feeling. So I've designed this score, and I'm hoping 9 lamps will be enough. But basically, if we look here, we can control the distance bar, shall we call it? So the game may start like this, where the fish is further away. I'm not sure which side. Yeah, we probably want this to be a success. So the goal is to light all 9 lamps. So we've currently got 5 lamps to reel in. So if we succeed and then succeed, that will light the lamps and get us closer to victory, but then we fail, that will put us further away from victory. So essentially all we need to do is connect up the success and the fail here to two sides of this dropper system. And here I've made a little bit of a change to the design where the two hoppers actually face sideways and face into these droppers here. The droppers just fire the item and get rid of them, but a comparator reads the dropper, and depending on which dropper received the item, we can output this to the success and the fail. From testing, I do think the item falls too fast, so we may have to extend this up a little bit, and then it's just a concern of hooking up a randomizer to the dropper at the top. And finally, once this reaches the very end here, this signal, there'll probably be a bit of delay and some music, and then this will fire the item on a honey wall. And this will be the item that is selected from, so we mentioned here we would have the 4 different droppers with 9 stacks of fish. That fish will make its way all the way into here, and then if you succeed, the fish is then thrown out into the wall and you have to catch it. Now, I've found that this is quite easy. I want it to be easy, but I do want the player to kind of be tense at this moment. You know, they could mess up. I will probably have like a training thing kind of like this outside the game so that the players can get comfortable with the mechanic, because it's not a mechanic that you really interact with very often in the game. But as you can see here, it's, you know, I'm having to land and fish it, and it's still pretty easy to do. I could even have this fire higher up, give players even longer to fish it. But yeah, if they succeed, they get the item. So this will be a named item which has whatever information I want to give. But what I do want people to do is use the format name thing that we've got on Zedcraft to add the weight to the fish. So I might have like a few double chests with every possible weight. And then the player can just offhand that item and add that as lore to the fish. And then they can also add like their name and show that they caught it and something like that. I want these fish to be kind of like prized unique items for everyone, because every fish should have a unique weight. And of course, the player who has the heaviest fish overall, or the heaviest fish of a certain type, you know, that's an even more prized possession. And we could have quests and weekly challenges and prizes and tokens that people can earn with all different ways of doing things. Bounty boards, that sort of thing. There's a lot of fun that we can do with the actual end game. You know, once people are catching a few fish, I don't want it to just be a catch 'em all thing. I want there to be a bit more to it. And now, fast forward to the future, and I have been starting to put this game together. And it's so complicated. It's all well and good knowing all the individual parts, but not knowing how they connect together in a 3D space has just kind of messed with my head a little bit. But I do want to show you where I've got to with this, because there are a lot of mechanics that I've already been able to build into this. So to begin with, we've got the starting mechanic, and if I hop down here, you can see that is accepted into a dropper, which then sends a signal into the system and also fires the dropper so we can record the items that have been caught. This signal then passes through one of these target blocks, and these target blocks are lowered by the daylight sensor system. So we've got this mechanic working up here. So it's currently on day, but if I change the time, you can see it changes to night. It moves one of these redstone blocks, which changes one of the lamps, and that updates the targets down here. So now if we caught a fish at this time, it would send the signal to this dropper here. And here you can see I've added in some of the potential items I will use for the fish. Those items go down here. To here, it goes over these item filters here. Very basic stuff if you've done any kind of item storage. We do take a signal from every single item, but some of these are combined together. So as you can see, these 3 hoppers here will all send a signal to this redstone line. And what this does is these are the groups of the different weights. So this, I think, is the heavy line here, and then the one all the way back here is the lightest line, because this is the clock that runs through. So if the light line completes the clock here, this means it goes the full journey all the way around here. But if the acacia is triggered, then we get the very short clock here. Now, what also happens here when this redstone signal comes through is we do this little reset thing. So the previous weight that was selected, as you can see here, this lamp is on. This signal will come through and it will remove this item, turning off this lamp. That is before the item goes through the filters. So we get a reset and then we get the next weight selected. Regardless of which weight is selected, we will get a signal through here. And if we come up here, this is our arrow timer. So this will trigger the 1 minute timer, which will send a signal through this clock. And every time the signal goes round, the signal will come up here and power one of these 2 randomizers. Now this is a 1 in 9 chance of success on each. So it's a 2 in 9 chance that every time the clock fires, one of the lamps will be lit. But there is a chance that both sides will get a lamp lit. And the way that works is we've got this randomizer. If the signal is strong, it will send a pulse through here. And this is a shulker box randomizer. So a shulker box will go into this space here once the piston retracts, which will briefly send a pulse of a certain signal depending on which shulker box is selected. And that will send a signal here which powers one of these lamps. If one of these lamps is selected, then this torch will be on, which sends a signal down here, and this is where the weighing system will be turned off. And I haven't got to the weighing system yet. Now, one complication here is if we want this clock system that's based on the weight of the fish to power the next step, so the reeling phase, we do have a problem because this clock will only loop for a minute and the reeling system lasts an unknown amount of time. If I do want that kind of mechanic, I might need to build another one of these over here that stays powered as long as that phase is being played. I haven't quite wrapped my head around that yet. But yeah, I will demonstrate how this plays out, and there is one bug or one little issue that I do want to talk about because somebody might have an idea of how to fix that for me. But like I said, to begin, we just fish here. That fish goes into the system. I won't show what goes on this round, and I will just imagine that I'm a player here. So now I'm waiting for the lamps to light, and there we go. So we hit the targets. I've put these lamps here so that you can see when they get triggered. So this feels like a heavy fish to me. This feels like it's going quite quickly. But there we go, all the lamps are off. This would mean the weighing system is working, and now the weighing system is paused. And now it's working again because we've turned all the lamps off. This feels quite fun to me, I think. But there's a problem. Did you notice that? I hit that target a couple of times and it didn't trigger. And I've tried to change where this fence is. I've tried different ways of getting the signal from the target block. But once I put these lamps here, I noticed that sometimes the lamps just don't fire. It's almost like maybe it's something to do with the fishing rod, and there's just certain placements where it simply thinks the fishing rod stops and it doesn't like recognize it as a hit. And I can't for the life of me figure out how to fix it. I'm going to keep doing it for a while until I find a spot where it's got that problem. Or maybe it will just happen straight away. So that worked. That worked. That worked. Okay. So it's working. It's working. It's working. Why did it not work at this angle? Was I moving sideways? I might have been moving sideways. Let me try and find that sweet spot. There we go. So you see how there's a spot here where it just doesn't recognise that it gets hit. That worked. That worked. That worked. That didn't. It is clearly hitting the target. Like, it's not like it's close to the edge. Okay. There we go. It's not like it's close to the edge. It only needs a signal of 1 to power the lamp because it's on top of it. And yet, sometimes it just doesn't fire. And it's not completely game-breaking because when you're moving around and playing this game, you're not necessarily going to hit the target from the same angle twice. So if it doesn't work, you can just try again and it will work. But it is kind of frustrating as a player to do the right action and still fail. You know, I talk about randomness all the time in my games, but that's not a fun randomness. That doesn't add any element of fun. It just adds frustration. And, you know, if you're taking this game seriously and you want to catch a really heavy fish, you want to do as well as you can in this section of the game. And to get something like that, I'm glad it did it on cue there. To get something like that where it just doesn't work, why would this not be powering? And yet if I move, I mean, even now I'm moving. Is it a distance thing? If I take a step back, it seems to be a distance thing. But because you might be like a certain angle, I can't force the player to be exactly at the right distance in front of each thing. You know, maybe if you're further away, it will all... Clearly not, because that just failed. So yeah, I am struggling. Please help if you have any ideas of why this happens. I really don't want to use like a bow and arrow or snowballs. I want the fishing rod to be the mechanic of the game. But, you know, and this is single player. Like, I'm in a creative world. It's not like a lag issue. It's not anything like that. But yeah, that little frustration aside, I'm really pleased with how this game is coming along. It definitely feels like my ideas will work now that I've put some of them together. And I think a lot of this is probably the most complicated part. Outside of, you know, building a decoration for the outside of it. That will be difficult for me. But yeah, I'm pleased with how it's going. And I think next episode, I do want to complete this game. Build it in survival, everything. If this is your first time hearing about the Colourlympics, it is a competition that I've been running throughout this season where 8 colours, the ones you can see behind me, compete in various farms and projects of mine in order to see which colour is truly the greatest colour. It's all a bit silly, but it's good fun for me. Now, the very first thing we did, I think in episode 1, is a fishing contest. And in that one, I think it was just fish 100 times and each type of item had a different value. I wanted to mix it up this time, so I created this contest. Each colour will catch 2 enchanted items. Their enchantment level will score points. So, for example, Efficiency 4 and Smite 2 on a book would score 6 points. And you can also get fishing rods and bows as enchanted items, not just books. So there's quite a bit of variety here. So first off, we have yellow, which scored 7, with this bow scoring 4, this book scoring 3. Here we can see orange scored 8 points with a very similar bow and then a power 4 bow. Red scored the same as yellow, 7 points, with an unbreaking 3 bow and a power 3 mending 1 bow. Pink then only scored 6 points, which might get them last place, with this Curse of Vanishing power 1 infinity bow, which scores 5 points on its own, And then this mending fishing rod. Very unlucky with the rod there. And very unlucky with how many items I had to catch before we got these 2 items here. Now, Cyan here also scored 7 points with a power 3 and Curse of Vanishing Unbreaking 3. Rod. Now, Cyan here scored 11 points, which tied with second place, but they lost the tiebreaker. So here we can see a fishing rod for 4 points and this fantastic bow for 7 points. But then for the tiebreaker, they got another fishing rod for 4 points. Purple was the other colour to tie for second, and they got 7 points in the tiebreaker, meaning they get the silver medal. We can see this fantastic book worth 8 points, and then a very simple bow, but they didn't need anything else. And here is their tiebreaker fishing rod. Fantastic. But that was not enough to give them the victory. Blue is our victor in this event, who scored 14 points with this amazing fishing rod and then this very useful bow. So that means blue gets the gold medal, purple gets silver, and lime gets bronze. So if we take a look at how that affects the overall scores, the bronze for lime puts them in joint 4th. Considering they were rock bottom a few weeks ago, this is fantastic form for them. Purple gets 2 points for the silver, which means Cyan is now in dead last place. And our winners, blue, were already joint 1st, so this puts them 4 points ahead in the lead. Possibly the biggest lead we've had so far in this competition. That's the only event for today. I've not really been around my farms much, but we'll check up on a few farms next episode. And now it's time for the connections game. So here's the connections puzzle from last episode. As always, there were 4 groups of 4 to find, and let me talk you through these groups. So to begin with, we had minecart, boat, elytra, and horse, and these are all methods of travelling. And if you're new to these, the yellow one is usually the easiest of the group. Next up, we have carpet, bed, banner, and painting. These are all things made from wool. And then we can see a few tools here. There's actually 5 tools, but we want the flint and steel, carrot on a stick, warped fungus on a stick, and the brush. And these are all tools that can only receive the same 3 enchantments. So these can all receive Unbreaking, Mending, and Curse of Vanishing. That is it. Whereas shears, on the other hand, can also get Efficiency. And lastly, this group may seem a bit weird at a glance, but these 2 very bizarre categories here, the Evoker conversion spell and the specific name tag, probably mean something to quite a few people. So if we select all of these, we can see these are ways to change a sheep's appearance. So you can shear the sheep to get rid of its wool. You can dye the sheep to change the colour. You can give it a specific name tag. Is it Jeb that turns it into a rainbow sheep, and Dinnerbone that will turn it upside down. The Evoker conversion spell is a little bit of an Easter egg where you can convert a red sheep into a blue sheep, or the other way around. And I believe that's a reference to Age of Empires. And this is today's puzzle. And I will say straight away, you're not going to like this one. But here are the clues. We have soul sand, purple tiles, flint and steel, lightning rod, trapdoor, rabbit leather, bedrock, impaling, bucket of squid, bamboo log, flaxen chestnut, white, dark bay, buckskin, popped chorus fruit, and dapple grey. And I definitely mean this when I say this time. Good luck to you all. As always, you can find the link to this in the description. So that's it for today's episode, but in this outro I do want to tease a couple of things that I've been doing in the last few weeks. Firstly, this here is our map world, and I have been working on a little card game here. The game is called Colour Connect, and it's going to be a long project, so you might not see it again for a few weeks. But if I come over here, I can show you what the cards look like on a map. And I've also been spending a lot of time here. This is a TCG arena, the Hermitcraft TCG, that Ash on the server was somehow able to make work here. I don't fully understand it, but if you do want to see some TCG matches getting played, let me know and I could include that in a future episode. But that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope we see you next time.